at a Delaware repair shop. In an email on April 12th of 2018 to his assistant, Katie Dodge, Hunter Biden complains that he's been shut out of one of his Wells Fargo bank accounts, quoting the email. Too many cooks in the kitchen, too many profile changes and such. Happened 10 days ago, too. My dad has been using most lines of this account, which I've, through the gracious offerings of Eric, have paid for the past 11 years. Eric refers to Eric Schwerin, Hunter's business partner, who was the co-founder of their Rosemont Seneca private equity firm that the Chinese communists are so fond of. Another email, April 9th of 2010, Schwerin, his business partner, wrote to Hunter, I was dealing all afternoon with JRB's taxes, but solved a big issue, so it was all worth it. On June 10th of 2010, he wrote, your dad's Delaware tax refund check came today. I'm depositing it in his account and writing a check in that amount back to you since he owes it to you. Don't think I need to run it by him, but if you want to go ahead, if not, I will deposit tomorrow. You know, it's almost like, I mean, and I'm no FBI sleuth. Let me say that at the outset. It's almost like Dad and JRB and the big guy are the same person.
I think you're onto something. Did you read Nancy Drew books when you were a kid?
I did. JRB.
JRB.
Those are the initials on President Biden's monogram shirts because his name is Joseph Robinette Biden.
Shh, don't tell anybody.
I think I've just cracked this case. Yeah. So why is Eric Schwerin, Hunter's business partner, doing Dad, the big guy's, JRB's taxes? Why are they sharing a business account together? It's almost like, and I don't want to jump to conclusions.
What?
It's almost like the vice president, now president, was in business with his son Hunter. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that there's an FBI investigation into Hunter Biden for, as it pertains to questions of tax fraud and filing as a foreign registered agent, perhaps. I don't know the extent of it. I know there was one opened. I don't know if that is a ship that will never find a port or not, because I'm not an FBI sleuth. For more on this topic and a few others, pleased to be joined again by our friend Kevin Brock, former Assistant Director of Intelligence for the FBI and former Principal Deputy Director of the National Counterterrorism Center. Kevin, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
And your neighborhood FBI sleuth.
Yes. So, you know, this might be just, you know, me putting the string Beautiful Mind style into things that are unrelated. I don't know. So what do you think of the Hunter Biden emails that have been unearthed, and whether or not, frankly, if Hunter's a target of the FBI, of an FBI investigation, then shouldn't the big guy, JRB, Dad, pick your moniker, shouldn't he also be?
One would think. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out through a Justice Department run by Merrick Garland, who issued a directive last week to the FBI to focus their attention more on parents protesting at school boards than on actual issues of public corruption or burning cities or other issues that Americans might surmise the Department of Justice was busy itself about. Hunter Biden and his father obviously were attached at the hip on certain interests important to the family, business, and wealth accumulation. I think the emails are more than clear. Your sleuthing notwithstanding, I think that is pretty clear. And I will say this more in a global sense. The Department of Justice and the FBI need to make public corruption a higher priority than it is in this country, and start looking at politicians' accumulation of wealth. The statutes that the government relies on to prosecute public corruption are fairly narrow. You almost have to catch somebody taking cash in hand through a bribe and that type of thing. But the ramifications of corruption are much broader than that. Congress, of course, we probably can't rely on to pass laws that will make it easier to examine things that they do that the average person would view as corrupt. The statistics show that a lot of people go into politics at the federal level and come out much richer. Joe Biden spent almost 50 years earning a government salary, and yet has, by anybody's standards, a high 1% lifestyle with multiple homes and that type of thing. How did that happen? There literally, I heard the other day, there's an app out there that you can use to track Nancy Pelosi's family investments, because she's outperforming the market by 30%. So if everybody just invests like Nancy does, you'll do very well. Does Nancy have any inside information that might help along those lines? No, probably not.
Yeah, but she has a husband who knows what to do with it. Yeah, right.
Well, and these are legitimate questions to ask regarding politicians' behaviors while in office that allow them certain advantages that I consider corrupting certainly to our whole system.
Well, as it pertains to Hunter Biden, though, are they really going to put a full force effort into an investigation into his emails? Or is this kind of just, appeasing the public, what they're doing?
That's a great question, Amy. I have no insider information as to the depth or scope of FBI investigation into Hunter. If it exists, I think it does. But it may be narrowly focused. And you may see them ending up with a reliance on things that you pointed out, tax code violations, that type of thing, but failing to address the larger issue of using a political office as high as the Vice President of the United States to leverage business deals that occur in the family's favor, and that are now, and I think this is a fair question, coloring U.S. national security policy towards China, and whether or not certain decisions are made in that regard, that would otherwise be made in a different direction if the family wasn't beholden to certain business interests in that country. And when I say business interests in China, it's business interests aligned with the Chinese Communist Party.
Do you think former FBI Director Jim Comey will shell out $75,000 for a Hunter Biden original piece of blow art?
Talk about getting access to the president. My gosh.
Yeah, maybe if Hunter buys 10 or 20 of Jim Comey's latest book.
Right, sure.
They do a swap.
Do a little trading.
Yeah.
I want you to. We played this last week when this guy was on, but since you were a counterterrorism expert, this is to me one of the more remarkable statements I've heard from a former FBI special agent, particularly in the counterterrorism area. His name is Clint Watts, and he was on MSNBC, and they were talking about 1/6 because that's all they really talk about is January 6th. And this is what he said about January 6th and, the essentially the domestic terrorist threats facing America.
This sort of rise in violence that we're seeing in schools, it's just a reflection of a rise in violence that we're seeing all over the country. We're seeing it in schools. We're seeing it in grocery stores. We're seeing it on airplanes. To me, is this really about people being upset about mask mandates? Or are there sort of underlying disruptive forces, white nationalists, anarchists, whatever in this country, that are using mask mandates and a public health crisis to sort of wage chaos?
Jason, a year ago, I think we started talking about mobilizations to polling places, and primarily we were worried about local polling locations. And we did see sort of vigilante poll monitoring, surface after the election. We saw people show up at election recounts, and that's only continued for about 10 months now. And it really encapsulates every single issue. It is masks, it is vaccines, it's vaccine mandates. It is anything involving the local level. And if I can say anything since January 6th is the protests and the mobilizations to violence have gone from national to local. It is really school boards, health officials, election officials that are facing a lot of the toughest challenges and threats to violence. And there are no resources and very limited sort of intelligence to preempt this. That's what's so difficult about this. That it's a capacity issue, and one where you're seeing kind of these national movements mobilize on very local locations.
So this is in defense of course, the federal intervention into school board meetings for parents that disagree with CRT or COVID policy. And you see what Watts did there, former special agent counterterrorism, January 6th, which was an insurrection, domestic terrorists, one and all, is now brought down to the local level, and it's presenting the domestic terrorists and those shadowy figures or groups behind them, allegedly, are plying their trade at school board meetings and the like.
So there's a trend here. First of all, I don't know Clint Watts, never heard of him. But the statement is ludicrous on its face, and obviously you'll notice he offers no examples. I love these statements, these broad statements where there's accusations of violence at school boards, and it was really backed up with no anecdotal information except as it was pointed out in the School Board Association letter to the president, some minor arrests and disturbances at school boards by angry parents. This now, their suggestion can be categorized or should be categorized as domestic terrorism. So you take Clint Watts' remarks, you take the letter from the School Board Association, and other commentary in more leftist media, and you see a concerted effort to expand the definition of two things. Number one, racism. Number two, domestic terrorism. I worked domestic terrorism for years. Domestic terrorists are horrible people that use bombs, arsons, armed car robberies and murder to advance their sick ideology. Parents protesting loudly at school board meetings are not domestic terrorists by any definition, and an effort by those who hold certain political positions regarding masks and critical race theory and transgender rights, efforts by those folks which align with the president's party to expand the definition into domestic terrorism must be resisted, and I think we're seeing that.
The other suggestion he makes that I think needs to be addressed, and it's rather ironic coming from the defund the police crowd, but that local authorities are under-resourced to deal with keeping the peace at a school board meeting. Is this beyond the capability of local police?
No, it's not. And I live in Loudoun County, which has become a lightning rod county, their school board here, for different events that have happened at their school board meetings, and kind of started or gave encouragement to parents around the country to start resisting some of these radical ideas that are being pushed by school boards around the country. And at most school board meetings, you don't see a security presence, maybe one deputy or one police officer routinely. And then, we saw they keep playing over, or did play up until this week, one particular arrest, which is cited in the letter from the School Board Association to the president, of a Virginia man who was arrested for disturbance. Well, it turns out that man, his daughter, was sexually assaulted, battered in a girl's restroom by a boy wearing a skirt, which the Loudoun County School District sat on and didn't make public, and denied that there were any instances like that out there. So his anger now is put in a little bit more perspective. I have several daughters. I would think that if that happened to one of my daughters, I'd probably be sitting in jail right now. So there, perspective is always a valuable thing, and so I guess to get back to your original point is this commentary about parents resisting these types of policies, which are all supported by the left and the Democrat Party, and interpreting that as domestic terrorism, which deserves the full force of the FBI and the Department of Justice and task force formation and the use of special investigative techniques is chilling and needs to be put in perspective. And as I point out in the article I wrote this week, the FBI, which doesn't have to follow every directive of the Attorney General, particularly when it's tinged with politics, the FBI should resist this.
He is Kevin Brock, former Assistant Director of Intelligence for the FBI, former Principal Deputy Director of the National Counterterrorism Center as well. Kevin, thanks as always for being with us. Appreciate it.
It was my pleasure, Dan. Amy, good to talk to you. Bye.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy using the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
So the dream was to build your very own law practice. Be your own boss, call all the shots. But have things like billing, HR, timekeeping, and all the other management stuff turned your dream into a nightmare?